Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We are here with self proclaimed financial wellness geek, Heather Coleman. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Majeed. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your TEDx talk. What was the title of your TEDx talk?
Let's talk financial wellness.
Let's talk financial wellness. I had the privilege of being the TEDx speaking coach for TEDx Canada, where I met Heather Coleman first. And recently, she published a book with Lucky Book Publishers called, what's the title?
Our money narrative and the impacts on our financial wellness, the things we don't talk about.
Let's talk about the things we don't talk about. Oh my gosh, Heather, I remember one day my dad got so mad at me because I talked to my friend from school. I think it was like fourth grade. And I told him how much my dad makes.
Ah,
And when my dad found out that I told someone how much he makes, he was really angry. And I was like, why? And he said, because his mother works at the same place and you might know something. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, there are certain things we don't talk about. So let's talk about the things we don't talk about. What are the things that we don't talk about?
well, money, religion, and politics.
Mm,
It's funny because now on X or Twitter, like the most of us refer to it who are of a certain age, politics are talked about all the time, right?
uh-huh.
Religion's referred to all the time.
Yeah.
Money is still the taboo thing we don't talk about.
Mm,
We tend not to share our opinions on it. Um, and I wanted to break that cycle. Um, because money is the one thing that no matter where you are, it impacts us, right? Money does not discriminate wherein you show up to work at a job, you do get paid.
uh-huh.
So there's discrimination on how much I can make, my background. I don't want to, discredit any of that. But when you show up to work, you get paid.
Uh-huh.
Fair as that. Religion, politics, we can all stand on different sides of the fence. But when it
Uh-huh.
comes down to money at the end of the day, it is what it is. It has no opinion.
And yet it seems to be the thing that so many people argue about, so many people worry about, so many relationships get broken over. It's in some ways for some people a religion to worship, to pray for. So, how can we improve our financial wellness?
Oh, gee, that's a loaded first question. For me, the whole reason why I wrote this book was to start the dialogue. And it's actually being mindful of even just where you are as an individual when it comes to money, right? So, what is my relationship with money? How did I grow up in a household? And what were the conversations around it? And
Mm,
more importantly, people get obsessed with this need of needing more and obtaining it and all that, instead of stopping and realizing, like, what am I even doing with the money that I have coming in? And am I on the right strategy and approach for me? Um, so I really took this step to be like, you need to do a little bit of those check boxes for yourself to see where you're at, because there's a lot of things, a lot of misconceptions. And if you don't do that pause to say, you know, do I fight about money? Do I have an emotional reaction to money? Do I, get really excited about spending money on a nice pair of shoes or whatever it is? That's mine. Hi, my name's Heather. I have a problem with shoes. If you start being aware of that, then you can't actually make impacts on your financial wellness because you have a closed eye, a blind eye to it.
Okay,
So
so the step is to get clear on how am I getting emotional about money? What are the stories about money? What are my habits with the money? What's my relationship with the money? And as I understand, you are a financial wellness educator, so you go into companies and educate adults. Is
yes.
that right?
Yeah. So my focus that is that adding financial literacy as a wellness component. for a lot of organizations that are looking to offer overall wellness. Because historically, organizations put a lot of money, right, into, pensions and benefits and that sort of stuff. But there was nothing for finances. And that's the one consistent thing that brings us to work every day amongst all employees, is actually to get paid. And if we don't make financial wellness a priority and teach this stuff, the data out there is saying that it's actually impacting our productivity. So by not focusing on it and not teaching adults how to manage it, what we're actually doing is not helping them in their overall wellness. Um,
Would
you
you
know,
would you say that financial wellness is a mental health skill, or it's more like a life skill?
so I think if you're not financially well, it will impact your mental health.
Yes.
So I think it's a foundational piece. Do I
Got it.
think that everyone who is doing financially well doesn't have mental health problems? I would say no. I think that's a misconception. But what I will say, it's almost like a bedrock. If you're not putting a pillar in place for financial wellness, no matter what you do for mental health and the other pieces, you're missing an opportunity, and your tower is going to fall over.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Okay, I have a very basic question.
Okay.
What is money?
What is money? Money is the thing that we use to pay for life. If we think about like the hierarchy of Maslow's, there's this whole psychiatry thing that we need some foundation thing. I think money is part of that basic security that we need to function as humans. In today's world, you can't necessarily say, hey, Majeed, I'm going to trade you my fidget toy for a cup of coffee, right? We've seen it done. I know there was years ago, some guy traded a paperclip up for a house or something crazy. That is so far and few between. We are an economic society that functions on money as the opportunity to pay for all of our basic needs.
It's a thing we use to pay for life.
Yep.
It gives us the security we need to function.
Correct.
And as we were talking about productivity in the workplace, without the foundation of financial security, financial wellness, um, then our productivity drops, presumably because we're worrying about money, and
Or,
it's affecting our ability to be productive.
and to show up. It's interesting because if I were to ask you, and I ask this to most of my audiences, how many of you show up to every day at work to get paid? Almost 100% of the room raises their hand, right? And
Right.
if you don't, I'm going to actually call you up to say, you're here to get paid. Stop, put up your hand unless you're a volunteer organization. And
Right.
then I ask a subsequent question. How many of you have been formally taught how to manage your money?
Uh-huh.
I'm lucky if one or two hands show up.
So this brings me to the question of where most people get their teaching, which is school. And while I could tell you the two-letter symbol for most of the chemicals on the periodic table, I would have not known how to get a loan or manage my finances per se. Why is that? Any ideas?
You know, this one's near to dear to my heart because my dad was a high school teacher.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because he actually took the time to sit down with me when I got my first job. He took half my paycheck and put it into a GIC. And I didn't ask any questions. Like, why are you taking 50% of my paycheck? Why a GIC? Like, what's the point in all of this? Like, what's a checking account versus a savings account? And why do I want one? And all this sort of stuff. It just kind of followed what my dad did. So I'm like, he seems to be doing pretty well. He's a teacher. But I think he did that because he recognized that school wouldn't do that for me. It wasn't part of the curriculum, it wasn't part of the conversation. And I think this stems back to the first thing, the things we don't talk about. What it was considered this topic that, well, you should learn that at home. And you're going to learn about it as you go, as you become an adult, and everyone should just know how to do these things. So I actually think it was a misconception that people didn't put focus on because they weren't having the conversation around it. So now we're at a point where there are massive organizations doing these research pieces saying, wait a second, this is a fundamental problem for us, and we don't know how to spend money. We don't know how credit works. We are going in this national debt level where we're spending $1.75 for every dollar that we make. Oh crap, that's not good for us as a country. So then you're getting some different viewpoints of recognizing the impacts of not teaching this.
I see. So back to the thing that we don't speak about, we
Yep.
apparently also don't teach about,
Well,
and we are seeing, I won't go into national debt and monetary policy,
no.
um, but I really see the connection to wellness, stress, productivity, how you show up. I think, as a society, the people are tired and lack a resourcefulness when they're just managing to pay their debts and their bills and keep things afloat. There's a Karl Marx quote that I will misquote that has something to do with a nation in debt can't have a revolution,
Yeah.
which is not to say that, I'm calling for a revolution, but I understand the feeling where you say you're saddled with debt. It's like weighing you down, debt and payments and managing the bank accounts and the fees. And I know for a lot of people, it can be very scary just even to open up the bank accounts and to get in there. I remember my dad had a wooden desk that would slide shut and have a brass key, and he could lock the key. And inside there was the checkbook and the bills. And I was not allowed near that desk. Do not open it. And it was done sort of in secret. The things we don't talk about.
The things we don't talk about, Jade. And I think, my grandmother was born in 1922. She was a depression baby. What she saw and how she managed money, now looking back, is outstanding, right? Bought their first house, paid it all off. Everything was paid in cash, no debt. Like, it was really, really focused and strategic. But that's because that was the influence, that you could lose everything like that. Now, that influence, I don't think, is always the best way. And there's this big fear around it. And if we're not educated on, well, how can you diversify your money, and how can you do well? How can you pay off debt faster so you're not drowning and still enjoy life? Like, until we have that conversation and be able to spread it, it's going to be this desk thing in a lock that we don't talk about. And
Fascinating.
there's some
Fascinating.
really smart people that do it well and talk about it really well, and they seem to be successful at it.
So how would you like people to feel about money, Heather? You're going out there educating, you're speaking on stages, you're giving TED Talks, you're writing this book. Tell me about the world that you envision where people can feel better about money and have a more functional and positive relationship with money. What do you see?
you know, I say that the education piece is our superpower, because if we actually take the time to be like, you know what, I can do this. I'm willing to learn about it, open it up. Maybe I'm not going to be a financial expert. Geez, I'm not. Like, no one knows all the answers. But if I can feel inspired to make this a priority for myself, that is life changing for me. And that's what I want people to do, is be open to learning and talking about this, because it really is life changing when you're no longer stressed about money. Like, to not feel that burden or that saddle or the heaviness that comes with feeling inept, right? Like, I've had many conversations with people where they come up to me afterwards and they're like, I am so stressed about opening up my credit card statement. Like, every month, just opening it up causes me some level of anxiety that just is overwhelming. And then actually, when you break it down and stop, it's like, well, you're the one spending that money. So you're literally causing your own anxiety every month.
Hmm.
And that's the part where just learning a little bit of skills and strategy without being overcomplicated, because money can be complicated in the way that some people teach it and talk about it. It seems like this big thing that I'm never going to be able to learn. And that's not true. It's just learning a language in a way that it's all of a sudden I can be like, you know what, I'm going to do this one thing. And you know what, it's actually going to help with my financial stress and I can reduce it. And that's the stuff that I want. Is I just want you to feel open that, you know what, I'm going to make this a priority for myself. I'm no longer going to suffer from it by getting in my own way.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, I know you're in being asked to speak on stages. Tell me about these speaking engagements you're doing. They're asking you to speak about financial wellness.
Yeah, and it's funny. So what I love, the reason why I love talking about what I do is because I'm not selling any products. Okay, I don't
Mm.
sell financial products. I don't manage your money. I don't do any of that. Like there's no kicker
Hmm.
for me at the end. I get paid to
Hmm.
speak and I get paid to inspire people to make this a priority. And the level of trust that you're able to build with an audience in a group when you're actually like, I don't care what you end up doing. I just want you to do something. That changes the dynamic in the room. And so when I get paid to speak and talk about things, I'm talking about like why we need to make financial wellness a priority. I'm talking about those misconceptions about money that we have that we don't recognize that they impact us. And I'm actually trying to talk about some real life examples of honestly where people have fallen on their faces and been able to go in a different way and change things, right? And hopefully, by telling these stories and being real with people and giving concrete examples that you can take away that aren't necessarily changing all aspects of your money, but maybe one or two, all of a sudden you have things that matter and can inspire people to actually do something and take action. So I do work with different organizations where, we might be focused on like a retirement session or getting out of debt or, getting into the nitty gritty of stuff or like the 30,000 feet stuff of like why you need to do this. And here's a strategy to do it. And so kind of all over the place, Majeed, and whether it's, a single women's group doing a book, conversation versus like a large organization like the RCMP, Canadian Armed Forces, who I've done training with across the country. I'm kind of
Yeah.
been all over the place.
Well, that's remarkable. There's so many conversations to be had about money and changing the relationship with money, changing the feeling with money is so important. And I have so many conversations with prospective clients in my business, and when I ask them what do they really want, they tell me something in the form where so that they won't have to worry about money anymore. I want to make this much money so I don't have to worry about money anymore. Or I want to make have this thing coming in so that I don't have to worry about money anymore. And what I learned personally is that you can make a ton of money, have a ton of money, and still be constantly worrying about money. That I remember having that realization, having over six figures cash in the bank and feeling like, why am I still worrying about money? Because it's more than just making a certain amount. So I think you're getting to the root of the problem, and the world's better for it. And what an exciting time to be alive with money systems changing and such a chaotic world and new cryptocurrencies. And gosh, we got to keep our heads screwed on straight through all that, huh?
Well, and it's funny because there's no one way to manage it, right? And people are like, oh, but let's put all our money into crypto and let's do all this. Okay. I don't give a lot of financial advice, but I will say if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, probably not the greatest idea. Just putting it out
Uh-huh.
there.
Uh-huh.
But there's nothing wrong with looking at emerging markets, right? And finding ways to carve out a little bit to invest in it, right? Netflix
Uh-huh.
tended to pay off back in the day versus Blockbuster, right? All
Uh-huh.
those that held on. But it is a really cool place. There's a lot of resources out there to be like, should I be conservative? Should I be like aggressive? Like, where should I fall on the spectrum? And money, actually, JC Brook, my co-founder for the company that I work with, he refers to it as money as is unique as our fingerprints in the way that we
Mm,
manage it and choose.
mm,
And it's true. And so because you have so many options now to decide and make like decisions versus like what our parents or grandparents had, like to invest in the stock, you would go and pull up a newspaper and you would see. right? And you have to go and call someone to say, I want to put, so much money into this stock. We have that like our fingertips on our cell phones now. And you can go and you can look in and make decisions and you can change it. And there's robo advisors and there's all these things
Uh-huh.
now that make the money world so cool. I sound
Uh-huh.
like a geek, see? Because
Well, that's important. I gather that your relationship with money is, as we started this interview, the self-proclaimed financial wellness geek. You're geeking out, you're excited
yeah,
about it. If you were to ask people, how do you want to feel about money? In your case, you seem pretty excited about it. I think, as I was saying earlier, a lot of people would say, I just want to not have to worry about it. And a lot of people would say, I would like to not have to even think about it.
you know that when I talk about one of the goals about teaching financial wellness, and what I loved about Enrich Academies, they do talk about how they want financial wellness for everybody. And when I think about what does it mean to be financially free and I define it, I say it's getting to a place where I'm no longer stressed about my money. It's getting to a place where when life throws those curveballs at me, which anytime life hits you with those things, Majeed, what's the first thing that gets hit? Usually it's our bank accounts at some point get impacted with life curveballs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a cancer survivor. I am happy to say that um that 2 years now, great, exciting. But when I was going through that journey, man, was I ever worried about what if I stop working? Am I going to have enough? Am I like, what about my will? What about my bed? Like all of that stuff is really heavy. And if I was in a place where I'm like, wait a second, let's set those things up for my financial wellness and let me just concentrate on the heavy thing that I have to deal with, that's great. But when we're so not open to having the conversations about the impacts of money through those life curveballs, or we haven't prepared for them or even had the conversations around them to prepare for it, then it becomes worse. And then not only are we dealing with money stress, we're dealing with that life curveball, that life stress that really may need more of our focus and attention than the money part. And so that's the power that I talk about with financial education is if you start learning this stuff, making some small changes, all of a sudden that stress about money goes down because you do have a strategy. Now, it's not going to be perfect. Life is expensive, stuff comes up,
Yeah.
but you at least have some opportunities to build a pathway to reduce that impact of that financial stress on you.
The illusion of control. They say we make plans and God laughs. But if it makes you feel good to have the plan and feel like you have the strategy, well, then that's the point.
That's
And
the
I think
point.
ultimately that's the point is like, what is it going to take for us to feel good about money?
That's right. And turning a blind eye to it, or as I always say, ostriching to it, right? Stick your head in the sand.
Yeah.
That is not going to give you any sense of relief of the financial stress you're dealing with at all. And it actually is going to perpetuate it. Avoiding it will just at some point is going to hit you and it's going to hit you way harder. So the more you can open your eyes and be like, okay, where am I actually at? Right? All of a
Hmm.
sudden, that's the most powerful thing. And there's an example that we actually give where we talk about doing a cash flow analysis. And I'm going to get a little geeky on you here. So, a cash flow analysis is an opportunity for you to look where your spending is actually going and versus where you think it has gone. Right. So,
Hmm.
people talk about having a budget and they're like, oh, budget. And then I'm like, well, do you actually see if you're on track for a budget? And we worked with this guy that ultimately it turned out he was going into debt by $1,000 every month. So what does that mean? $12,000 a year he's in debt. So once he did this cash flow analysis, set himself some new goals, he was in the green $1,000 a month. So
Oh,
it
amazing.
flipped it on his head where he's now giving himself an additional $12,000 a year just by seeing where his own spending was going. So completely in his control.
Wow, he must have been so elated.
Oh yeah, $12,000 like raise almost just by being like, oh snap! I opened up the curtain to see what I'm doing.
Amazing. Yeah, I can see so many people avoiding this experience. One person gave me advice one time. For some reason, I never forget it. He said, you know how when you have like a girlfriend or a wife and you want to keep the relationship, well, what do? You go on dates, right?
Yeah,
You have a nice bottle of wine, a nice good vibe. Okay, do that with your money.
Date
Have a
night.
nice date. Take your money on a date and like sit down and really go through that, have a nice vibe. And I thought that was really interesting because, that's like the whole relationship with money, right? And yeah, up until that point, my money engagements were not at all romantic. Um, can't say I ever did the bottle of wine and the fancy music and flirting with my bank accounts, but it did really open my eyes to the idea of really kind of personifying this thing that lives in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll tell you another one that's really powerful. You get three chairs, one, two, three, and you get the person and you say, sit down in the first chair. You say, that's you. I'm going to interview you like I'm Oprah. You're on like the talk show. And then now sit in the second chair. And they go sit in the second chair. And I say, that's money. We're going to facilitate a conversation between you and money. And in the third chair, we say, sit in the third chair. And we say, imagine you are a neutral third party observer of the conversation that's about to be had between the you and the money. And then for about 5 to 10 minutes, we like facilitate a conversation between you and money. And then we ask the third party observer, what did you notice about this relationship? And it's very powerful.
Very powerful. You know, I I think I say it at the end of my book, talking about specifically like you are in your own way when it comes to money. You can make a choice at any point to make a change. But financial wellness is the first thing that we say I'll do tomorrow. It's like people deciding to be like, oh, I'm going to work out. The first like 3 months of going to the gym are always, I would say not even 3 months. The first month of January is packed. And then after that, it goes downhill. But
Yeah.
money doesn't even, we're not even giving ourselves that spot where a lot of people are like, you know what, for this year, I want to get out of debt. I want to do whatever. And I want to make it a priority for myself. But because they don't necessarily come up with that strategy or the plan or even the willingness to have the conversation with themselves about where am I at? What should I be doing? We set ourselves up a little bit for failure by not being honest and open about it. And just like dieting, where people are like, I'm going to stop eating cake. Okay.
Okay.
If cake is your favorite thing and you decide to take it out, let me tell you, not long after, you're going to be sitting there eating a whole cake to yourself. That's the same with money. People all of a sudden start making strategies and goals about money and cutting it in the places that bring them the most amount of joy. And so you
Okay.
start equating this money thing as cutting those things that you actually love and do. And
Uh-huh.
again, you're going to set yourself up for failure because then you're like, screw this. I don't want to do this. I'm going to go book like a $10,000 trip that I can't afford because I deserve it. YOLO living, all these things.
YOLO living.
Yeah. Most
Yeah.
expensive statement other than I want a divorce. That's what Kevin Cochran, my boss, always used to say. And I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Wow. Um, Fascinating. So, what you have found is that people start to engage with the money, they start to make cuts, they cut where they're most joyful, then they get resentful and they have a rebellious act of self-sabotage. Fascinating. Okay, do you have a specific recommendation for someone who says, like, I want to get financially fit? Do you say, like, okay, I want you to do an hour a week where you're going through all your checking accounts? Or do you recommend a certain behavior change in terms of like, I think of it like getting on top of the pile and all the cards and all the bills and all the accounts.
Yeah. My favorite piece is actually finding that 15 minutes. And that's all it takes to get started. And then
15 minutes.
plop it in your calendar.
Yeah.
So I always suggest to people if you're gonna start anywhere with money, start with a net worth tracker. Okay. So a net worth
Net worth tracker.
tracker is a statement that we use that has your total assets, total liabilities, and it's honestly your report card of where you're at with your money. The only thing, it's your own report card. There's actually no grades. But that exercise of creating that and committing that time to yourself and making it a commitment is the easiest way to get it started. And I say 15 minutes a month is all it takes. to start updating that and making it a habit. Now, the first time you do it, Majeed, to your point, if I'm gathering all my bank statements, I'm doing all the stuff that I need to input it in my statement, it might take you a little bit longer. So maybe that first block, you're like, I'm going to give myself an hour this week to fill in my net worth tracker. And then every month, I'm going to fill it in on the 15th of every day in the morning when I'm having my coffee. Step one,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as easy as that. Because it was Peter Drucker who talks about you can't improve something you don't measure. And your net worth tracker is literally the only thing that captures all your aspects of your money, where you can start measuring where you're at and where you can improve.
Cool. I'm Googling net worth tracker. So all the assets, all the liabilities, that's like a snapshot of right now.
Where
And
you're
then
at.
you do it again at another time.
Every month, you should be updating your net worth tracker as your commitment to yourself for your financial wellness.
Makes sense.
It's a small thing, and it really does all of a sudden make it forefront. And then you can start working on strategies on what are my financial goals. So if you're someone who's struggling in debt, you'll see it on your page. If you're
Mm.
someone who's, has a ton of savings but wants to make sure that you're diversified, you'll be able to see it there and start working on goals in that, because you're not going to change all your money all at once, right? And that's why this is a really powerful tool, because it allows you to pick one thing. Doesn't take very long to fill it. Once you do it once, you're just updating numbers on a monthly basis for 50
That
bucks.
really is the key number.
Yeah, it is
As a
the key
business
to
owner,
it.
I've got my sales, I've got my profits, I've got what's in the bank account. But at the end of the day, if I could only measure one number that I want improving over time, that's the one.
That's the number. It is.
Great. That's a great tip. Okay. For people who want to get your book, how do they
Yes.
get your book?
Well, my book is on Amazon, so you will find it there. They can always reach out to me directly at heathercoleman.ca, and I'm always willing to talk to somebody and reach out and set them in the right direction, send them a link. But yeah, I'm on Amazon. It's pretty cool.
I love it. Published author, bestseller, TEDx speaker. Search Heather Coleman TEDx and you'll see her, watch her talk. It's a work of art. It's hilarious and I loved working with you on it.
You were such a you took my millions of thought, Majid, and helped me turn it into a beautiful story. And I think my favorite line that I said, and you named it, in order to get our minds right, we need to get our money right. And to help me find that craft in being able to carry that message, I'm super thankful for you through that process.
Well, this is a complicated idea. There's emotions, there's psychology, there's culture, there's this abstract concept thing called money. What even is money? And you found a way to describe it with story, with emotion, with enthusiasm, with simplicity in a way that I think helps the idea spread as TED Talks are intended to do. And for people that are interested in having you come to speak at their event or their group, what what is like a title or a topic that you're like, it's financial wellness. You're the financial wellness speaker.
I am, you know, I get told that my approach is, I call it the triple R: raw, real, and rare.
Cool. Cool. And you're seeing companies increase productivity when their employees are more well.
Yeah. And not me just saying it. So, like the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, who is like the financial literacy of our country, they did all the stats and all that on this, and they found out 42% of people in an organization are losing 3.5 hours of productivity per week just dealing with personal money issues.
Personal money issues. Yeah. Cool. I'm so excited to do a net worth tracker right now.
Yes,
I could do that.
you can
I'm
absolutely.
going to.
You're going to honestly,
Yeah.
once you start Majeed, all of a sudden, like you're like, oh, look at me, I went up like this much this month,
Oh,
and it's
I Googled it while you were talking. I saw a spreadsheet that's all color coded and organized. And I
mhm.
was like, that's gonna feel good just to see all my accounts, assets, liabilities on one sheet. I'm already benefiting from the peace of mind that comes from having this. I was thinking we should call this thing something, this 15-minute. What is it? Is it a money date? Is it a
Oh,
15-minute money sprint? Is it a 15-minute money march?
you know what? I like the wine and dining approach
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
let's
15
I on it
minute date with your money.
15-minute
A
date. I
quickie.
like that.
It's a
Yeah.
quickie.
It's a it's a quickie. Not a one night stand though. This is a full on commitment.
Yes.
We don't want a one night stand with our money. We want to make a commitment. We want to make it part of our
Yeah.
lives, but we also want some independence and don't want it completely consume and take over us all the time.
We don't want to be like updating our net worth spreadsheet every day.
No,
Although
no.
I will tell you this, a entrepreneur I very much respect who runs like a multi-million dollar business said that he checks his bank account, business bank account every day
Yeah,
and looks at every transaction every day. And I think he even goes over to a spreadsheet and copies over the balances manually. And that's really like finger on the pulse.
that's very finger on the pulse.
Uh, and I don't know how if it's stressing him out to look at his bank account every day, but that when I the day that I heard that, I was operating under the principle of log into the bank account as infrequently as possible.
There's different schools of thought on this, Majid, honestly, and I'm of the opinion do what works for you. So it's
Mm,
no like if it's work to do it and it's stressing you out and you can commit to doing it the once per month or whatever to do it for your net worth tracker, great. I am also probably very similar to your friend where I do have a pulse on most of my accounts on a daily basis, but I'm
Bailey.
also like over Monica'd in my budgeting to an extreme. I don't
Uh-huh.
expect people to do that, but it
Uh-huh.
brings me some sort of comfort to manage money, and I talk about that a bit in my book when I talk about becoming a mom for the first time and feeling like managing my money was way easier than raising a tiny human.
You know what? I almost forgot to ask you, how do we talk to kids about money?
Yes,
And my kids, we go to the cafe, we order whatever we want, and then dad takes out his phone and waves it around and puts it back in his pocket. And somehow we get stuff, you know? And, at some point, and when they were kids, I was teaching them, this is $10 and let's count the change. But that's so rare now
it
in
is.
my life. And I just tell my kids we're rich. I just say, good thing we're rich, right, kids? And I want them to feel that we are rich because I grew up where the story about money was like, we don't have enough ever. And we should never spend it unless we absolutely have to. And if we have to, we should get it on sale. Yeah.
You know, I'm of the opinion, and I do go into the family dynamic, and I do talk about the household you grow up in and how it influences you, right? So if you had a household that talked about money versus one that avoided it versus one that thought about it, that's 100% going to impact you on how you talk to your kids. So you did almost 180 to what your household did,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you did that probably intentionally to be like, you know what, I don't want my kids to have that feeling that they can't have things.
Mm-hmm.
And you know my two kids, what I try to do is be open about birthday money, that sort of stuff, them making choices about if you buy this you can't have that later, right? So I really want to get in the mindset with kids starting young when they get birthday money, put half of it away in a savings account. You know what? You can even do an in trust account where you open up like a stock trading account for them, and they're going to be making way more interest and that sort of stuff off that in their name. And there's some really cool things you can do to teach them. But even the fundamentals of like when mommy goes to the bank, here's my checking account. This is where my money comes in. This is how much, like starting to talk about it in really basic ways. But the point is talking about it. I think, having some provinces right now make it mandatory for financial literacy. Like Alberta, grade 10, 11, and 12, I'm really stoked to say Enriched Academy teaches that training. It's wicked. It's mandated. It's awesome. That's not the same across the country. So I think it's finding a way to
I
gamify
love
it,
that.
to
I love that
reward
for
them.
Alberta.
I know. We go Alberta. You know, not everyone's there, but I think it's just finding a way that it's never too early to start saving. Compounding interest for kids, like honestly, if I would have known that, like I would have been able to buy a house earlier. Like depreciating assets, like do I really need to buy
Hmm.
a brand new car that's gonna be used 5 minutes later? And I not just buy
Hmm.
the beater and be happy? Like there's a lot of things that you know our kids are influenced now with social media, right? We look at the Kardashian lifestyle, the brand names, all that. Like Lululemons and all those things cost a lot of money. When I was a
Hmm.
teenager in the grunge phase, my mom used to give us $20 to go to Value Village, and like everyone
Uh-huh.
was super jacked up about it,
Oh
right?
yeah, my
Like,
kids know Value Village is where where they can get whatever they want. Yeah.
life,
Fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah, you've espoused some good principles to pass on to the kids. Um, and what I love about your work is that it encourages people to talk about the money. And part of your subtitle is like the things we don't talk about.
yeah,
And in my line of work, helping people speak and speak their truth and share their stories, what I have found is that anything that people feel that they cannot say, that they hold inside, that they fear to say, is harming them.
yeah.
And I wish for people the ability, the courage, and the finding the words to be able to speak about what's going on for them, financially or otherwise. So I love that you're
Yeah,
encouraging people to be able to have conversations about money.
Jude, I think that's part of my message through this is money stories don't always have to be about the hard stuff, right? Like, how people don't even talk about like, I have a variable mortgage versus fixed mortgage. Like, what should I do or why? Like, if someone does something really good with money, like, let's talk about it and share it. And I think historically we've done this concept of school of hard knocks, trying to white knuckle it, do it all ourselves, falling, making mistakes. And people aren't saying, like, wait a second, you know what works really well? This tool, this thing was really helpful for me in this situation. And it's building that community that's more comfortable sharing those stories. Now, money can be risky, right? And this is where we sometimes get a lot of those external influences through social media and stuff making recommendations. I'm
Hmm.
a big believer, do not believe everything you say on social when it comes to assuming that situation is good for you. And
Uh-huh.
having a team, a strong team of money, like, a good accountant is never a bad thing, right? Like I am not a tax expert, nor am I supposed to be. They do that.
Hmm.
It's okay to work with a financial planner if you aren't comfortable putting the time and commitment to doing it yourself. So, it's also having those conversations too that not everyone is out to get you. And having good money coaches is also an important thing. And having a community that will talk about the hard stuff with you is probably the most important.
Financial planner, accountant, money coach. Uh, yeah, yeah, there's a whole world with your money, taking care of your money.
Yeah. Your will.
Your will, who's going to take care of my money once I can't take care of my money?
Very important. And, people don't talk about that because, again, it's a hard thing to talk about. But we work really hard every day for what you make, your house, your family. And if we're not taking the time to create a will, we're actually no longer having a plan for all the things we've worked hard for.
Hmm. Well, there's a lot to manage, and let us have peace as we approach this management. And Our Money Narrative is the name of the book. Congratulations on your book. Congratulations on your TEDx talk. Thank you for your work. And Heather Coleman,
Thanks, Majeed. Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
one more time, the website or how people can get a hold of you.
www.heathercoleman.ca.
There it
Super
is.
simple.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Majeed.